Hey everyone, this is Bill Lamori, and I just want to say welcome. I think that we're live at this point in time. We are live, and we are in part two of an online series that we started last week called Race and Redemption. And I'm here today with my friend, Pastor Monts, pastor of the Citadel of Love in Hartford, and that's actually where we are right now. That's where we're having this conversation from today. So, first of all, thank you so much for hosting this and being a part of this conversation.
Absolutely. Welcome to the Citadel.
Yeah, and also I do want to introduce behind the scenes today. We have who's going to be. We want to have more comments and interact with your questions this week. So we have Jalith who's going to be hosting today. Jalith was with me. She was the guest last week that I was talking to. But Jalith, you mind popping in real quick and saying hello? You probably won't be seeing her the rest of the time, but
Hi
there
guys.
is Jalith. Thanks so much, Jalith. Jalith is going to be working with us as we um, go through and again interact with everyone's feedback and comments. So, what Race and Redemption is all about is it's entering the awkward, it's entering the uncomfortable, and it's having conversations dealing exactly with that with race, but we're taking it along gospel lines because you and I are both pastors. That's kind of what we're called to do, the
Right.
thing that we know. It doesn't mean we don't touch other things, but it means that's our primary role. But we want to have these conversations, and we're going to enter into lots of different facets of that. But we are continuing this today with what I think will be a challenging topic. And I do want to point out that our goal with all of this is we don't think, I mean, maybe you have all the answers to figure this out, but
No, I promise I don't.
okay, I promise I don't too. But what our goal is to come up with, and as we have this conversation, enter the uncomfortable, talk about the difficult, is to walk away with at least a redemptive thought or two, an action step that we can take. We may feel powerless to change all the structure, all the things around us, but there's something we can do as Christ followers. And if you're not a Christ follower, again, I do hope that there's something that you're able to get from this as well. But our primary redemptive spot will be with followers of Jesus because that's again the area that we're in.
Amen.
So today's topic is there really hope to heal the black and white divide in America? As we said last week, in our country, we've got lots of problems with race and ethnicity,
Yeah.
but I think ground zero is the black and white tension, challenges, history,
Mm-hmm.
um, future, present, all of that going forward. And so we want to spend time specifically addressing this and stay focused on this for a number of weeks and then pivot to other areas and then come back to this one. Um, but again, I want to know, I want you to guys to know that Pastor Monts and I didn't script anything out that we're about to talk about right now. He won't have that. It's kind of, just I started to bounce some ideas off you, and your comments were, don't say anything else. Let's see where God takes it. Let's see where the conversation goes. So I just want you to know what we're coming with today is not a script, but it's a relationship and a friendship, and it's built on that trust, but also the gospel. And as we go forward today, again, I don't know where we land, but I know I trust you, love you, respect you, and so
Likewise.
thank you. And I'm looking forward to this today.
Yeah.
So again, what I want to do is learn a lot because what I appreciate is that you're someone that I've been able to learn through. I remember when we did a message series called Race and Redemption years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You came spoke at our church, and you were a guy. I asked you like a million questions as we were starting on this journey, and you helped me, and you have helped me over the years. So that said, let me begin being quiet now as I rephrase the question
Okay.
and ask: is there really hope to heal the black and white divide in America?
Um, from if I look at that question from, I don't know if I'm saying this right, a Christocentric point of view, absolutely. Um, if I look at it from a worldview, from 40 years of being on the forefront of this fight, no.
Hmm.
That's the short answer. No. Um, but I believe that Christians can do this, and I believe that Christians can do this the right way, there's one element that is really critical. And people are going to have to be honest.
Hmm.
And if people aren't completely honest, then it doesn't even make sense to have the conversation. It doesn't even make sense to even try.
Hmm.
People have to be honest. And um, and nobody can go into the conversation thinking they know all of the answers in advance. If you do it, this divide can be healed. But, and I think at this time, in this season that we're in right now, it is incumbent upon people who don't look like me to be the ones to say, we have to be the change. We've got to make the change happen,
Hmm.
this time. Because for so many times, people have looked at us and say, well, what do you want to have happen? We say, we want this, we want this, we want this, and this doesn't happen. So structures and systems have to be changed, but the people who are leading those structures and systems have to be the ones to change them.
So you said a lot there. So
Yeah.
let's unpack it.
So yeah.
And we knew that we were going to have a lot of that. That's the big question category that we're under today. But we're going to keep digging
Mm-hmm.
as the conversation flows. But I think one thing that you said a bunch of interesting things, but one that really stuck was this idea of don't bother having the conversation unless you're going to be honest,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that that is a reason. Like if you're going to part of an honest conversation, I think, is honest intentions.
Yes.
Like, am I coming to pacify? Am I coming to tide over, or am I coming to really learn and figure out what we can do in this? And so, I guess a couple questions to you because, and I'd love it maybe at some point in this conversation if you could share because you just mentioned 40 years
Yeah.
of doing this,
Mm-hmm.
which is amazing. And I know you shared with me how God has called you to this, even though you may not sometimes want to be called to this. God has called you, and I think He's equipped you for it. But what are some things in your experience that people aren't honest around, and it shuts down the potential of change? Because maybe what are some of the reasons that
Mm-hmm.
we're not honest, and then what do you think some of the things we're not honest about?
Okay. So I think let me start with the reason why. I think the reason why we're not honest because the truth hurts too much, and so it is difficult. And then the other thing is that if I really had to, as a person who's not black, try to view my life through your lens, there's a whole lot of truth I'd have to tell. But since I don't have to, I just sort of act like it doesn't really affect me. Okay. Um, and so often what ends up happening is people will try to dismiss history. And some history is great. In some history, we want to act like it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't do that. You got to look at it all, and then you have to look at the effects of what happened, and tell the truth that we all deal with pain and trauma differently.
Mm-hmm.
So for you to tell me get over it is not sensitive to where I am, because this may be my trauma, but your trauma could be rape. And for me to say to a rape victim, get over it, that's inappropriate.
Right.
You see? So
Yeah.
it becomes inappropriate for you to tell me to get over what I went through in my trauma. And so we have to be honest and say some things really did happen, and we really did try to sweep them under the rug and act like they didn't, and act like people should have just, come on, let's get over it and let's sing kumbaya,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And if you're not ready to be honest about what has happened, then it's difficult to move forward and
Okay.
make change. So that was the second part. What was the first part of the question?
No, I think you answered it. What are some of the reasons we're not honest,
Oh, okay.
and then what are some of the things that maybe we're not so honest about?
Yeah. I mean, like, and everyone says it. I learned this from TV. America's first sin, or greatest sin or something is slavery. Um, and that is very difficult for people. Most of my Caucasian counterparts who don't want to deal with slavery will say, that was a long time ago, and I don't have slaves, and I didn't do that. So why is that an issue? And people, all of that is true. You're not a slaveholder and you didn't do it. That is absolutely true. But now, can we talk about what were the effects of that?
Mm-hmm.
I shared with someone just today that when Caucasian people came to this country, they came because they wanted to. They had a dream, they had
Mm-hmm.
a goal, they wanted a better life.
Mm-hmm.
We came to build your better life, not because we wanted to, but because someone sold us. And then we got here, we became someone's property. And when we became someone's property and continue to be someone's property for such a long time that it became our standard here, and for whatever you can say whatever you want, in our minds we believe people killed Abraham Lincoln because he freed the slaves. That may not be true, but that's just what we believe.
Mm-hmm.
That people hated what he did so bad that
Mm-hmm.
somebody wants to take him out for that. The problem with that is now, okay, so we have the Emancipation Proclamation, Juneteenth, everybody's free, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we're free at last, of course. And from there, we go into sharecroppers and people taking advantage of people and putting them in debt before they could ever really get ahead. The thing that I like to say to people who don't really process this, in America, for years, we built this country, and then we said, okay, fine, slavery's wrong, you can't be a slave anymore, fine, go. And that's it. Go. You don't get the 40 acres. You don't get the mule. You don't have a job that's paying you well. You don't have property after working 10, 20, 30 years. You have nothing. You just go. And many times, get off my property. All right. So now you got these people in a foreign land with no resources to go anywhere or to do anything. And so forever, and this is why one of my pet peeves when I hear people like, um, I won't say his name, but a certain person who has a lot of power in this country say that people of color are lazy, or you have laziness with black people. We weren't lazy when we were building this country for free,
Yeah.
for free,
Right.
and not getting paid.
Right.
you know and people don't process it like that.
Right.
And so now you get these people who are here in this country and they're running for their lives because people are angry. Some people still don't like it. And of course, I don't know if you've heard about it, but I think you have because everyone's talking about it now. 1921 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, you have Black Wall Street,
Mm-hmm.
where you people say you need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And that's exactly what these people did. They developed their own area, and white people came in and burned it and destroyed it. And we have countless stories of that over and over again. So when that happens, people are like, how do I get ahead without you trying to stop me? It's You needed us. White people needed black people in this country. We we came here because you purchased us and worked us. A master needs a slave. The slave didn't need the master,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And at the end of the day, I think as we're turning the corner now, these are the kinds of hard truths that white people have to say. It was wrong, and it was wrong for us to say yes, you're free, and not give you anything. Okay, some, and I don't even want to deal with the nice masters because to me that just doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, well, he was a nice master. He gave me a quarter. Whatever. The point I'm trying to make is, and I'm speaking in generalizations.
Mm-hmm.
It People they started off in freedom with an economic disadvantage. and have never really been able to come to that next level on their own without so much work,
Hmm.
extra work, and even for a long time, nobody thinking, not nobody, generally the Klan could do what they wanted and got away with it. And so there's a mindset that no matter how hard you try, no matter what you do, I mean, why in the world would um, someone not just disavow David Duke?
Hmm.
I don't, in 2020,
Right.
I don't get that.
Right.
Given the history of the, why would anybody welcome him, want to speak to, why does that organization still exist
Right.
to this day and people think it's okay?
Right.
It boggles our mind. And so as we're moving forward, and I want to keep turning back to the future because that's where we want to go, but we have to be honest that black people in this country certainly started off at an economic disadvantage after creating wealth for white people, you know. And so from there, we come to now, and there are other groups in this country who really did receive reparations, you know. And I'm not the one who can explain how it can be done, if it's going to be done. But I do know that it is challenging when you tell people you need to do better, you need to get it together, you need to do it on your own, and you are not given. You know, it would have been great if just say we were slaves for 100 years, 1619 to 16. I mean 1865. That's a little more 100, but just say if we were slaves for 100 years. Let's say the way to fix it is to flip it. Now white people be slaves for 100 years.
Right.
Nobody wants to do that. Wait. You're going to do back to me what I did to you? Aha. So then it really wasn't that nice.
Right.
You know, all right, fine. You don't have to be slaves. Just give me all of your wealth. Are you crazy? Well, I built it for you. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
So it's how we get to that place where people are ever rewarded. I don't know. And even though we weren't the ones who were there, it's been pervasive in this country and in this economy forever. And it was never properly dealt with. And unfortunately, the church exacerbated the lie. Slaves, obey your masters.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the, when you talk about the great sin of slavery that we have to confront, I think it's compounded, made even more repulsive by the fact that it was justified with scriptures, the very scriptures that we look to for hope, that so many of our the early church forefathers in our country
And can we
came
just
here.
be honest and say they were just ignorant? They they did not rightly divide the word.
Either ignorant or evil, right? Because
Yeah,
you got to
okay.
pick.
All right. I say both.
Okay.
They were ignorant and evil. But you get what I'm saying? That they were not, they were using the scripture incorrectly. And even if you understood the historicity of slavery in the Bible, you and according to the Old Testament, if you treated a slave poorly, they had to be liberated.
And there were protections
There
and
were
all kind.
protections.
Yeah, it's a different deal.
It's totally different than you could not beat a slave. You could not wound a slave in, you know, in the Bible days. And if you did, you had to set them free.
Right.
So we would have been free a long time ago, you know. But anyway,
Okay. So you just brought a whole big piece on the
I
table.
did. I
No,
did. And
which is good. Which is good. This is what we want to do, and that's why, by the way, we're doing these in conversations. I had someone remark to me last week that what they really enjoyed was that it was more of a free flowing conversation, and it gave space for ideas in the way that a post or a meme or an infographic is not going to do. And I think, I don't know about you, man, but when I look at the question, is there hope to heal this divide in America? If I'm looking at Facebook, my answer is no. I look at the polarization, left, right, even amongst people that are similar in a lot of ways, and I'm like, no, there's not. In that case, But again, I look to scriptures and we look in the book of Revelation, every tribe, every tongue. At some point, we know that is the future. Like
Mm-hmm.
at some point, everyone will, in equality, stand before Jesus and worship him as one. And we know that that's the vision of the New Testament, a multicolored tapestry of Christ worshipers not gathered around a nation or an ethnicity, but around Jesus, and that's our people and that's who we belong to. And yet we still seem so far. And one of the things we're talking about is being honest. If we're going to get to that point of unity, is look at what currently divides us and some of those issues. And one of the big ones, our history, a history of our country and what we look at. So before I continue in this, any comments or questions? Keep moving.
I just asked the question. Does anyone have a question I can share? PM me or the page for anonymity.
All right. So we'll keep moving at this point then, and just give us a holler if anyone wants to chime in. Um, so we deal with this big truth of slavery. And again, if we're going to be honest, let's take the things that you've heard, and as white people, either we've thought or we've heard or considered at some point. And there is the point, like you said, like, hey, I didn't own a slave, I didn't participate in that. And I think that that's pretty rude, right? Right. We could talk about the systems and so forth, but I think one of the things, if we're going to be honest, you have to address people's barrier. Because if the chasm is here, then how do we help each other build bridges across that? And I think one of the questions that is, okay, well, we talk about the idea of privilege, and there's a certain sense of white privilege just by the color of your skin. You have certain privileges. Now, it doesn't mean that someone of color doesn't have other privileges. I came from a wealthy family, or hey, we did have a successful business, or went to a certain school. But there is still this idea for some people to say, well, okay, well, I understand that's wrong, but I was dirt poor. My parent was incarcerated or died, and I kind of struggled through this. So what does that look like for me, and how do I contend with this, and what does that look like? Because I think as we're honest and we're confronted with the sins of our nation and looking at what that looks like, I think we have to start. I mean, you talked about systemic. I think each person has to come with grips for that. How would you speak into that, like as the person that's looking, saying, okay, I hear what you're saying, and that's awful. I don't seem to have benefited personally in a lot of ways. How'd you speak to that?
So I've thought about this a lot. I struggle with that because benefiting from white privilege does not always equate to money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the challenge. If we think the benefit is just money, then let me just put it to you like this, okay? We've seen the videos that are going around, people of color who are getting shot or whatever by police. There's also a whole bunch of videos going around, white people slapping the police, punching the police, cursing the police out. And every single time I look at it, I'll be like, if that was me, every time I say, if that was me, I'd be dead.
Mm-hmm.
I seen a lady, the guy was trying to get away, and she gets up, she starts, leave him alone, leave him alone. I saw a woman, who is your officer? Who is your boss? And I'm like, you can do that to the police? Because all I know is we're getting shot in the back while we're running away, not slapping them in the face. Now, granted, there are times when people will fight them too, but I'm telling you, I've seen these women. Who is your boss? No, I'm not giving you I'm not giving you anything. I know my rights. Ma'am, please give me your information. You da da da. I'm that to me is white privilege, and that's the benefit, that you don't get a gun pulled on you when you talk back, or
So, in
the
other
benefit
words,
is just not financial.
okay, so it's not just financial, because I think that it's a fair for people to have to look at and say, okay, I don't see it, it's not reflected in my bank account. I didn't inherit generational wealth,
Yep.
and so it's looking at it in other ways.
Mm-hmm.
And as a white person, let me just say this: like, if we're all got to start somewhere, and there's something we could do, whites, it's time to rein in our Karens. right? Enough of these videos of like going around bossing people around. I'm just going to say that because I could say that. So it's like speak to no more. Put a stop to it. That's a little thing, right? We got to start somewhere. So sorry, I had to
Yeah,
get that out of my system.
I don't disagree. But honestly, this is what my friends and I, this is what we've been saying. This time, white people have to teach white people. The white people who have seen it and who know it's not right. What I did in preparation for this time today, I spoke to 10 people
Hmm.
who I think have their finger on the pulse of what's happening. I said, if we had to teach white people something or we had to say something, what do you think is the most important thing that we need to be saying to white people now? And you know what? I would say 50% of them, what their one thing was, they need to educate themselves. They can't just depend on us. You can't abuse me and say, now teach me how my abuse makes you feel.
Hmm.
You know, you've got to do the hard work now and find the books, watch the videos. And if your heart hurts, be honest. When people have been killing black people, lynching black people, hanging them from trees. Police have been shooting black people for a long time. But something triggered in this country when everyone, for almost 10 minutes, watched a man die. It was a public execution with no trial
Yeah.
and no jury. And everybody said, in a nation of laws, that's not the way we do it.
The one encouraging thing I've seen in all of this is the one incident where everyone, I haven't met a person that says,
Well, but
yeah, right. It was like that's evil. You look at what happened. That was evil. That was abuse. That was awful. So now, what do we do with that? Where do we go with that? I think
mm,
that's where it gets tricky. That's where we
yeah,
need dialogue and conversation. But it was at least that, and maybe that's why the moment was so powerful. There's no asterisks
right.
on that one. It's like you said, it doesn't matter if he had a fake bill or whatever
And
the
and,
case.
and I heard he didn't. He
Yeah,
said it was real.
yeah, and who knows, right? Like my point is, it doesn't matter
Right. Nobody should die over a fake $20 bill.
when you're subdued and
And you have on what are
you
those
have
things?
handcuffs on your
Handcuffs. You got
back
those
and
things.
people are sitting around and
And
no one
and
should die.
and everyone's saying, "Stop, please. He's bleeding. He's not breathing. Check his pulse." You know.
We have
I
an
think we got some
anonymous.
comments or some questions Jalith wants to
Yes,
bring in.
we have an anonymous question. We want to be honest, but where's our voice? Facebook or other social media are brutal. Try to voice your opinion and you get attacked.
Yo, that is so true. That's how come I do not do a lot of Facebook or and even Instagram. I may post things on Instagram, but I don't do a lot of that. I think as Christians, we need to be having, instead of coming together and singing and hallelujah and worshiping, we need to have seminars. We need to talk. We need to come together and cry together and ask difficult questions and listen. So you can say, this is what happened to me, and this what has made me feel this kind of way. Because white people have feelings too. White people have been hurt too. I get all of that. But, and like I tell people, when people bring this up to me in this season, they say, yeah, the police need to stop, but what about black on black crime? That's another conversation for another day. We're not talking about that now. White people kill white people too. We're not talking about that. We're
Right.
talking about this,
Right, right.
So,
Staying on the focus and not explaining it away through stats.
yeah. So I don't know. I was just, for me, I think seminars, um, you know, churches having meetings with people coming together who just want to talk, not forcing people. But when I know in advance that on August 8th, we're having a conversation at 5 o'clock about this. So I only come if I want to be involved with that. And then everyone has a voice and we come in like you and I did. We may not agree, but we're definitely going to respect one another. That's where we get the voice. And I think that's where change comes.
And we probably agree more than we disagree, but
Yeah.
nonetheless, we can work through that.
Right, right. Yep. And I just think the more we hear one another and realize we all have had life stuff, it's going to help us move forward together. So I don't know if that answered the question, but for
Yeah.
me, I wouldn't try. I mean, I'm older, you see, so that's how come I don't try to have conversations on Facebook or fix the world on Facebook because, and to me, I often think most people who do that on Facebook, everyone's trying to become a sensation. What is the
Go viral.
go viral? What's the other term? Influencer. Everyone wants to do that, and I'm like, you know, that's how come I don't do it.
Okay.
You know, so that's me. I think coming together, touching one another, being in a safe space where we all know what we want to talk about
Yeah.
is how everyone gets a voice.
I appreciate that, and I want to speak to that as well. And this is not judging everyone that uses social media differently, but I'll tell you, I have intentionally over the years throttled back. And obviously, I'm using social media right now to have this conversation as a platform. But here's the difference, it's not a quick post or an infograph or an angry rant. Now, there may be time for those things, but I will say it usually doesn't do much. And I think Jalith and I were having this all it maybe make you do is empathize or get likes or comments from people that already agree with
Already
you.
agree with you.
But we're so wound up sometimes emotionally that we talk past each other, and you miss an opportunity to build a bridge.
Mhm.
And so I
And
like,
that's why coming together and sitting down and talking, you build bridges then.
yeah, and I think that's key. Someone asked last week in the comments, this is great, but there were only 30 people dialed in at the time. It turned into a few thousand people that ended up watching the video. So that was pretty cool last week. So, hey, no pressure. You just got to say some really good stuff. But the reason I started with this is because it's more of a conversation. But just get up and preach. It's like one voice. It's the white guy. It's the pastor. And we have church. We have a church filled with lots of different people. And I think by bringing in different voices, it's using the platform that we have to bring those voices in, have a conversation, and hopefully in some ways model what that looks like in a healthy diet. And my hope is that if you're engaging with this, you're not just like, okay, I watched this, and I do hope you share it, by the way. I hope you share it with your friends and people to check out and learn. But I also hope that you're engaging in these conversations too and building bridges with people and taking that risk because it's important.
And can I just say this? When we're having conversations, we really need to have conversations with our family. Um, I've often said that racism will go away in America, probably not in my lifetime, but these kids that are coming up nowadays, they think we're old and crazy. They love who they want. And when the races are so mixed that it's hard to have racism, we will then transition to classism.
Hmm.
So we're gonna always have something,
Right.
but as we get more and more people who are half this and a quarter this and all of that, it's gonna get to a place where racism really looks stupid because we're so mixed. So then we're gonna slip into who has money and who doesn't. We're gonna always figure out ways to feel superior to someone else.
So here's some hope. We're only a few decades of funerals away from dealing with racism in America. But I totally get what you're saying. But you're right. It's always going to be something. We're always going to find a way to feel superior, to lord it over, to separate, to distinguish in a way. So that's a good point. I don't know if there was any follow up to that or no. Okay. So, well, thank you. I appreciate the response on that. And I think the key is whatever platform is just figuring that out. And I think it's different for every person. I think
Mhm.
some people can use those social media platforms and other areas for it. But okay, so we've got this honest conversation. Let's get honest. Let's continue being honest in this. I think one of the things you said in the very beginning is, and I appreciated that, can this divide be healed? And basically looking from an American standpoint, from maybe from a geopolitical standpoint, your answer is no. From a Christ-centered focus, yes. And so then we talked about going back and looking at the issues, right? Before we heal the divide, we got to know what caused the divide, what caused the friction, what we're dealing with, the pain, the anguish, and I like how you said it. You don't say to a rape victim, okay, it's time to move on. It's like, but how do you bring healing and health so that they can move on? And I think that's one of the things we have to talk about going forward. But I guess here's the thorny issue. Um, oh, I'll pause that for a minute. I'll pause my thorny issue. Jaleeth's got something.
I love the idea of honest, open conversations, even though they may be hard. But right now it seems people are only yelling at each other. How do we start the conversations?
So I don't mean to be disrespectful. I promise. Please forgive me. But we're not yelling. And you have to try what we're doing. Like, yes, people are yelling, but we're not. So everyone isn't yelling. And I would say if you got someone in your family you can talk to, or one person at a time instead of trying to reach the whole world, find someone that you may agree with a little bit, and then talk with them. And I'm certain there's going to be something that we're not 100% on. I'm sure I've said some stuff already that he's like, but we're talking. And disagreement does not mean that we're enemies. Our life experience, our education, all of that makes us think and see the world differently. And our makeup. Like one of the things that I struggle with, and don't forget your thorny issue, I think it was. Okay. One of the things that I struggle with that I don't think is we don't have enough sensitivity to people who may have a mental disorder that is not recognized. And what I mean is, and please don't take this the wrong way, if someone looks severely challenged, I'm trying to use all the politically correct words, but if someone looks severely challenged, we say, oh, but let's say Ted Kaczynski, you gotta have issues to do that.
Yeah.
But you look like everybody else.
Right. And
You
there's a whole
know,
spectrum that
there's the
someone could
right.
be on.
And so we sort of we look at that and we say, oh, it's okay, and we look over here, and then we say, you should know better, but we haven't looked inside to see what's going on. One of the things when I watch Dr. Phil, he talks about people's brain.
Wait, you watched Dr. All right.
I,
Sorry,
I
go ahead.
stopped.
All
I
right.
stopped. I stopped.
Okay.
I stopped.
All
I
right.
did for a little while.
Man,
then
we
I
are
had to
getting
stop.
we're getting truthful. This is good.
I had to stop.
Okay.
But anyway, but I do watch Judge Judy. Now, I live for Judith Shinelet. So
Don't get me started on daytime television.
okay,
but-
Judge Judy, I don't care. I'll fight
All right.
anybody over Judge Judy. Okay.
All right.
But
I'm learning things. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
what, what the point I'm trying to make is that we give people passes, and we know how to be gracious. We just choose. Like this same person who doesn't get it over here, we say, okay, it's all right. And if you don't get it, or if I don't get it, we can't choke each other and try to kill each other because we don't. We say, okay, it's okay. I will not understand everything about my brother, and you won't understand everything about me, and that's okay. What we're doing is we're working on it. But there are some things that trigger some things in my life I'm not talking about.
Mhm.
I don't care how honest you want me to be, I'm not talking about it. I don't care how much healing it's going to bring you.
Yep.
I'm not talking about it.
Right.
And we've got to be willing to let people be where they are. I want you to go back to your thing, or if you want to answer that a little differently, go ahead.
No, I just want to say I appreciate that because, like you said, we're not yelling at each other. But just because we're not yelling doesn't mean there's a lack of passion, right? So you can still be passionate. I
And
know
not
this is
yell.
and this is an issue of passion for you. And one thing I would say is, again, a lot of times when we get on social medias, we're ranting, and then we come off. What does a ranting person do? Crazy, right? And maybe you're not crazy. You're just worked up in the moment. But what I've learned is just kind of pause sometimes before we get on there, because you can unintentionally create these riffs. So I think it's true. There is, as much as we look at sometimes talking past, talking over each other, there is actual conversation going on, and we can enter it.
And let me just say this, the louder you talk, the more people shut down. People don't get that.
Do you know people are deactivating their social media accounts more now than ever? And I think that's a lot of it.
Yeah.
Look, I'm out.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to comment?
Yeah. We got Jaleel coming in. You can come in and get your.
Okay. I just have one really short comment. Sorry, you guys. I'm just sit in the middle. Is that COVID okay?
It's
Okay.
not, but go ahead.
I'm just gonna protect myself. Okay, so the other thing to consider is like if you are not in community with somebody now or before, all of the racially charged things started happening, now is not the right time to start like really intense conversations with them. Become more proximate and build relationship with them and don't tokenize their experiences here um, just because now you want to start talking about race. Okay, thanks, bye.
Just
That's
drop a
good.
bomb and step out. But no, that's good. That's really really good. And the reason I, Jalith and I had a conversation, you and I have a conversation is because we have a history and we've been doing
For
it.
a
So
while,
now it's
yeah.
just was putting on the camera and letting that roll while we have these conversations.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that, and I think that's a great point. Let's come to the thorny issue because looking at the time frame we're doing here, we're not gonna have time to deal with all this today. But let's get it out on the table and maybe pick it up another day. So we come to the idea that in America, our geopolitical system is not going to fix this. In Christ, we have hope to fix it. But here is the challenge. Um, in Christ, we can. There's things that can happen that can't happen in any other realm. The healing of hearts. That whole healing you said of how do I receive forgiveness? How do I offer forgiveness? How do I through Christ we know that that can happen and it can heal hearts and change minds and make us if we didn't care about justice, care about justice. If we harbored grudges and it was unhealthy because sometimes that can turn from hey it's my pain but I'm processing it in such a way that it's unhealthy. Jesus can heal that too and bring that to where the anger that remains is the righteous anger that like Jesus displayed rather than an unrighteous anger. So we know all that's true. The problem is a lot of times it's wrapped up in not sure what's going on there, but we'll just keep moving. Is it's wrapped up in politics and the idea that, and I talk a lot, and this is the thorny issue because I look at it and say, when you hear I've heard this phrase, or justice or racism isn't a political issue, and you shouldn't look at it that way. And I agree with it, but that's the problem is where you need more nuance. Because while justice or racism isn't a political issue, it's a scriptural issue, it's a human issue, and we have to deal with it. The prescription for dealing with justice and injustice and race and racism varies and it ties in and it's wrapped in a whole system of politics. I look on the left and right, I don't see a side that isn't corrupt and I don't see a side frankly that doesn't have issues that break God's heart and make him mad.
Amen.
And I see that on both sides of the aisle and I'm just going to say that straight up and I'm going to say this as a guy who came and I feel like God over the years healed me and delivered me from political idolatry and wrapping too much of Jesus up into that. And I think he's helped me separate. Now, I'm not, I would say our church is apolitical in that we don't advocate for certain politicians or positions, and yet we still need to be about justice and against racism and anti-racism. And I think where we hit the wall sometimes is when, and I get in the church, there are people that should be in politics and political parties. So I'm not anti-Jesus in politics. I just think that the question I guess I have for us is if we're going to deal with this, because there are some systemic things, but then there are and some policy things, and yet there are also people that kind of wrap up Jesus inside of their politics. How do we even begin to process this? In other words, can people of different political stripes in Jesus work together, or has that become the gridlock?
It probably is. But I think we're at a good time to at least have people listen to someone who doesn't think like them or who doesn't vote like them. And so, one of the things that I tell people is vote. You must vote. It's important that you vote. And I'll tell them all the time over the pulpit, you have to vote. I'll never tell you who to vote for,
Mm-hmm.
but you must vote. Once church is over, then that's a whole nother story.
Right.
I can tell you what I think, but in church, that's not. What I'm concerned about is that I think if people are serious about change, then we have to hold our elected officials to a standard that says, are you going to make these kinds of changes? The same way that we will kick someone out of office if they don't get a stoplight on the corner where we want one, we have to do the same thing if someone comes along who says, yes, I'm about racial issues or racial reconciliation, and then they do nothing about it or they do things to turn it backwards. And so, because this is a hot button issue right now, it has been for a long time, but it's bigger now than it's been in my lifetime. Maybe, I don't know if this is bigger than the 60s, but in the 60s, I was a baby. So I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah.
So in my adult life, for sure, we have to say to people, what are you going to do to see to it that we're living in a different America? What are we gonna do about this? And it depends on what's important to you. And I think right now, so many people want to do something. It's just what everybody's like. What do we do? And so I believe that the politics is a big, big problem right now. But that's why you have more and more independence every year because people are like, they're all crazy. You know,
And even the ones that talk the right stuff, it's just till the election's over and
until
then
the
it swings
election, then
back
they go
to a
right back to doing whatever they want. Everyone knows this. We say in the church, God is good all the time, and all the time, God is good. A friend of mine said to me the other day, politicians lie all the time, and all the time, politicians lie. That's just what they do, and everyone knows it. And again, that takes me back to where I started. You got to be honest. And politicians are not. But they're the ones in this nation of laws who run things. So we literally have to infiltrate, even if we go in with one issue and say, I'm only going to be in for one term. And I'm going to use all of my political capital to make this happen.
and I won't be reelected,
And I
but
won't be
this is what I'm going to do.
reelected, but I'm going and working on this. You, unfortunately, if you weren't going to be reelected, then people call you lame duck. So it's like I don't need to work with you. And it's so crazy. But if we have more people who were principled, and the reality is this country thrives on money and lots of money. So that's why a lot of politicians get in there and they say, "Oh, I think I better change my mind," and "Oh, I like this money that this group is giving me," and hmm,
So, no, and I agree with all of what you're saying, and I think that one of the things that, and I, this is sort of, you have thoughts that are more well developed. This is something that's sort of simmering in my mind. So when I hear all of this, I look and say, because I think that that line, there's going to be people that politically are drilled down into where they are, and it's going to be, say, if you say, oh, change only happens if you switch who you vote for. Well, it, there's going to be people. Is there something else? But here's what I think: if we're Christians, our Christ, centric nature, our Christ lens should supersede our politics. It should come first and inform it. So I guess the question,
I wish it superseded everything.
our race, our gender, our class, all of that, it should be the way. And we talked a bit about that last week,
That's
and it's
Romans,
right. It's right there. It's hard to do, but it's right there. But I guess my question is, for the person that says, okay, I'm pretty locked in, would it help if at least Christians said, okay, this may be the party you're affiliated with, but I'm going to I'm going to drill down and hold the party accountable that I belong to these issues. In other words, if you think about, issues have flipped from political party because each political party, you want to say it's sort of cynical, but it's kind of true. Like each party has cobbled together a constituency that shows them a path to win.
Hmm.
And sometimes they like the people, sometimes they tolerate the people that they bring along the path to get there. But if the people that were part of this constituency started speaking up and say, this is important to us now, and we look at a lot of issues that have changed as culture has changed, I think that could be a way, in the absence of switching everyone to one side or the other on that, is at least hold your politicians accountable and begin to speak to these things. So I know this is a whole other issue, and maybe we
Yeah,
can bring that up another time.
yeah, we can. I just know that people need to be more human, and politicians are people. They know people in this country are hurting right now, and they know that people want change. That's why you're getting governors and even the president today doing executive orders because some things And that's the thing. Some things we can't wait for. We need to handle now. So you got governors doing executive orders. The president did an executive order. People hide behind everybody else when they don't want to do something.
Hmm.
But something needed to be done and quickly. And even though it's little, it's something, you know. So yeah, people need to hold these people accountable. And this is why people need to vote. And unfortunately, black people get apathetic because all of this marching is going on. And then you got George Floyd, and then 2 weeks later, right after George Floyd's funeral, you go down to Atlanta and you got something else going on. And people are like, when does this stop? When does it stop?
Hmm.
And there's a frustration, and so there's like they're all lying. I'm not voting for anybody, and people don't realize in this country with our system, not voting means a vote for the other side, whatever the other side is to you.
Hmm.
You know, if you don't vote, you're literally giving, because if we have five different parties, now you cannot vote.
Yeah.
But with two parties, not voting means it's for the other side.
And I'm just going to throw this in just for fun. Is I don't think your responsibility is to vote. I think it's an informed vote.
And
I've had people text me the day of, Pastor,
who do
who
I
should I
vote
vote
for?
for? And I said, here's my advice to you. If you don't know by now, don't vote because it would be irresponsible for you. And I'm not
See,
going to tell you who to
I
vote.
tell them to vote. Go in there, just make wrong mistakes,
Vote for
whatever.
Pedro.
But see,
Yeah.
you know why? You know why? Because I had people who died so that I could vote. I have to vote.
Yeah.
I have people who died, people who went through, who learned the Constitution. Because people would say to them, well, what does the Constitution say? And they have to say, and if they say one word wrong, nope, denied, you can't vote.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Right.
it's different for me.
Don't take it lightly.
I don't take it lightly. I have to vote every single election. I have to. And if I don't, I feel guilty. And so I do it. It's the first thing I do in the morning. Every morning I get up and I pray at 6 o'clock, except election day. Election day, I go stand in line at 5:45. I'm usually one of the first 10 people to vote, and then I go pray.
Nice.
So,
Awesome. Any No, okay. So why don't we do this? I think we're coming close towards the wrapping up. What I'd ask you is any final thoughts that either something that you wanted to come back to that we got away from while we were talking, and then maybe a final step, a redemptive step.
so let me give you my redemptive step first, or I don't even know if it's redemptive step. I want white people to educate themselves. There's a really great book, and I wish all the money from the book was going to, just causes, but anyway, it's called White Fragility. It is a good read, and I don't agree with every single thing in it, but it's a good read. It's written by a white woman, and white people need to read it. Okay, and she went around and dealt with race relations in corporations, and this is a result of her research and all of that kind of stuff. Powerful, powerful book. And so, if anyone's saying, "What should I do?" That's a good starting place. For someone who says, "I don't feel like reading right now," then watch 13th or When They See Us
Hmm.
on Netflix.
Yeah, yeah, I think.
There's a lot of good stuff on there,
Yeah.
but When They See Us or 13th, it's going to sort of it's going to jar your thinking, but it'll just help you get in to seeing things from another vantage point. Okay, and so this is my thing that I really want to talk about the whole time that I never got to, and I'll just end with this. Jesus says that we are to love the Lord our God with all our heart, our soul, all our mind, and all our strength. And then he says after that we are to love our neighbor as ourselves. And I believe part of the biggest problem that most of us have in America is we don't love ourselves, so we don't know how to love our neighbor.
Hmm.
And he says, you love your neighbor as yourself, but because we don't love ourselves, we can't genuinely love the rest of the world. And what we've done is we've replaced love with money, with houses and cars and things. And we think that means something, and it doesn't. And so you got a whole bunch of people who are going after all of these things: houses, cars, education, degrees, and money, and sex. And we've done all of these things, and they haven't satisfied us because we still haven't learned how to love ourselves.
Wow.
And so, if I've done all this other stuff and never done the hard work of loving me the way I am, because He loves me the way I am, and I got to love me the way I am, when I do that and I realize that I'm flawed, now it's easy for me to love you the way you are because I know I'm flawed. Even if you don't say it, you're flawed,
Hmm.
you know? And that's the challenge. If we could ever come to, I believe, really loving ourselves, not love, because we hear love our neighbor as ourselves. Oh, well, I got to do something nice for you. I got to, here, you want some money? Or, what can I do to make you feel like I love you? No, 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 no. Start here. Do you really love you? Do you think you are worth more than money? Do you think you are worth more than the biggest house on the block? Do you think you are worth? Are you doing what it takes to have a relationship that is peaceful with God? And once you're doing that and you have tapped into God that way, now you become a glory carrier. And wherever you go, you carry the glory of God. You become a light in a dark world. And then that's how you love your neighbor, by showing them who God is and how He can change your life. And I think that's our problem in America. We love money, we love stuff, we love things, we don't love ourselves.
Wow. That's deep. That sounds like a whole sermon that we may have to invite you back over to Calvary for soon and have you develop that a lot more. But that's good because there is an assumption built in love your neighbors yourself is that you actually love yourself. And what does that look like? And that, of course, is connected to the previous commandment: love God. Are we loving God? And then are we getting our worth, our value from Him, so that we can see ourselves the way God sees us? And so that's powerful.
And
That's
see everybody else that way too.
yeah, and then carry that on and
Yep.
see everybody else that way. I think that's good, and I think for me, I'll just sort of rest on a similar note, and that's the idea of I think it's great that people are getting involved, whether they're reading the books you recommend or showing up at a protest or using whatever platform they have. But I do believe this is all important, and yet sometimes any cause, it could be this cause, any good cause, could replace us doing inner work. And I think it was the thought of thing is you want to change the world, you got to start with changing you. And if we're going to go enter the systems of our workplaces, education, political arena, our churches, then we have to be in a place where our hearts and minds are changing, developing. And I guess that is that place. And then I guess our logical next step that I'd reemphasize is as you're doing that, I think it's important to step out of your comfort zone and begin to have these conversations as you built the relationship. And maybe coming back to what Jalid said is if you don't know anyone that's not like you, because we all have echo loops that we reinforce what we already believe with each other. Maybe it's now not a time to start with the deep end of how do we fix this together, but hi, how are you? What?
How are you?
Who are you? Let's
How,
get to know each
yeah,
other.
but how are you is so powerful. And let me just add this to what you just said, because this is really important. Look at all of this as I'm going to go and get a degree in racial reconciliation. Now, at this stage of your life, 80, 60, 40, whatever, if you're going to get a degree, some people go in and it takes 4 years. Some people have to take a break from it, and it may take them 8 years. But don't stop till you get the degree. But you don't get it in one march.
Hmm.
You don't get it in one meal with a person who doesn't look like you.
Yeah.
It takes a long time.
Hmm. Yeah. I think that's great. We may have the pictures on our Instagram, but that doesn't satisfy the requirement. You got to put in the work. So I think I want to leave it on what you said. I just want to say thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Pastor Monts, for engaging in the conversation, being someone that has coached and spoken into my life in a lot of ways, including this, and for hosting us here at the Citadel. God bless you all at the Citadel. What a blessing you guys have always been to us at Calvary Fellowship. Thanks to Jalith for being with us, hosting us, putting the technology together. And hey, thank you so much for watching this conversation. I know it's taken up some of your time. I pray that it's been valuable. God bless you. And hopefully we'll see you next Tuesday.